Welcome everyone to another episode of Tutorial Tuesday. It's week 34, 2020. Thank you so much for tuning in and thank you for participating. I have a couple of announcements and then we'll get right into your questions. And this week is all about lighting. So on Saturday, I did a poll and asked you guys what you wanted to see for tutorial week this week. And resoundingly, you guys responded with lighting, talking about beginning lighting equipment, what is lighting, how to use it, how to recognize it. So we're going to be talking all about that, and I'll be doing a separate segment today just on lighting. And this will be the intro to lighting, so watch for that. Okay. With that, announcement number one. If you haven't yet checked out my friend Waylon Lucas over on Let Freedom Reign podcast, go ahead and swipe up, take a listen to that. She gets pretty intimate about what brought her to where she's at today, being a pastry chef, being a celebrity host on the Food Network. Listen to that over on Let Freedom Reign podcast. Announcement number two. If you haven't yet checked out my preset store, go ahead and swipe up. Now what I've done is put together Lightroom presets that you can download, of course, for a price. And along with those presets, I've also added in textures. Now these are textures and presets that I use a majority of the time on my images. And always remember that these are just a starting place. So with that, let's go ahead and get right into your questions. Hi Riley, thanks so much for the question. She asks, on darker days and evenings, what settings should I shoot in? And the answer to that is almost rhetorical, but it's whatever settings work for you in those situations that you find yourself in. That being said, I have to think about what the lighting conditions are like out on location, what I'm shooting, and the bias that I have for getting the image. Meaning, if it's a heavily overcast day, there's zero directional light going on, and I'm at a branding, I'm going to try and freeze the rope in some cases when I'm covering the ropers. Now that means that I'm going to have to jack up my ISO, maybe ISO 800 to 1600 to get a shutter speed of say 1/2000th of a second. But I'm also going to have to open that aperture really wide to f2.8 to allow as much light as I can down the lens. That's one scenario. The other scenario is if it's in the evening and there's zero clouds in the sky and that sun is sitting low on the horizon, I typically photograph my subjects in a backlight position, meaning just as you see here, the light is coming in, it's hitting the back of my hand or my subject, and I'm photographing them this way, where the shadow side of their face is facing me. Now that poses a technical challenge because our cameras don't like to photograph dark subjects like that because there's so much ambient light around them. So you have to maintain your focus as well. But in a situation like this, what I would be doing is again opening up my aperture to f2.8, maybe f4, and I'd be shooting a little underexposed, say a shutter speed of 1/800th of a second, maybe ISO 200 to 400. Those would be my general settings. That's where I would start, and then I would manipulate them from there. So if it were too underexposed, let's say, maybe I would go down to a shutter speed of 1/400th of a second. Take a look at those, play around with it, and don't let that ISO stop you from getting the image that you want. Thank you so much for the question, Riley. Savannah, absolutely great question here. I don't think that anybody has ever asked me this before. She asks, tips on finding and approaching a mentor. From my own perspective, I do a lot of mentoring online, and I also do a lot of mentoring in person as well. Here are the tips that I would give you for this. Number one, do your research. Who is the person that you're trying to approach, and what do they do? Are they self-employed? Are they a photographer for an agency? What do they do? Do your research, number one. Number two, don't just throw a chip shot out there like, I'm looking for a mentor, how can you help me? It sounds very self-serving. In fact, you would get a much better response from me if you say something like, hey, I realize that you're self-employed and time is very important to you. Here's a mentorship schedule that I would propose. Let's meet every other week for an hour. I would like to learn more about lighting, off-camera flash, editing, exposure, those kinds of things. Don't just throw something out there like, I'm looking for a mentor, how can you help me? It's almost akin to somebody saying, you take amazing pictures, what kind of camera do you use? So do your research and then also propose a schedule and tell them what you're looking to do. And that's the third thing. Make sure that you know what you're looking for in the person that you're trying to approach. So if it's their editing style, if it's their shooting style, maybe it's a combination of all of those things and their time in the industry. Do your research, propose a schedule, and be open and honest about what you're looking for in that proposal. I hope that helps you. All right, next question in from Kendall. Thank you for this. She asks, do I typically shoot in the largest format image on my camera? And the simple answer to that is yes, I do. I've been shooting 100% RAW for, I don't know, a decade or so. And what comes to mind is something my friend Bruce Dorn said, and that was, we pay for all those megapixels, so why not use them? In my case, I use a 5D Mark III and a 5D Mark IV, and I use RAW on both of those. And just to follow up on this, I also use Lightroom and Photoshop for editing. Thanks for the question, Kendall. Next question in from Sarah, and she asks, what is your most common metering mode that you shoot in? And the answer to that is 99% of the time I'm shooting in a center weighted average. And the only time that I really take that off is when I need to get an exposure for just one singular subject. Usually it's not moving, and what comes to mind is when someone is up on stage and they're facing the audience, there's spotlights on them, and I'll move my metering mode to spot to get that exposure for the person. But again, 99% of the time it is center weighted average. Thank you for the question, Sarah. Okay, our next question comes in from Ellie, and she wants to know what my favorite light modifier and off-camera flash is. And she gives a couple examples like umbrellas, but to be honest with you, Ellie, I haven't used an umbrella in years. So let me take you through where I started and what I use now. So first of all, I started out using a Canon 580 EX2 flash. I've had this for a long time. It works wonderfully. I matched that up with this Westcott, I think it's a maybe a 22 or 23 inch softbox. It's called the Rapid Box, and I used it for a ton of stuff. Mostly high school seniors, just one at a time. I could probably get away with lighting 2, maybe 3 people with this, but this was beautiful. Now the inside of this one is a silver, and I like that because it's more specular, especially when you need that extra kick of light. I still have this in my bag, but I don't use it that often anymore because I use this now. So this is the Explorer 600 TTL high-speed sync light. I matched that up with this 25-inch beauty dish, and you can see that it has the white inside, make a creamier highlight, or not a creamier highlight, but just a creamier transition between the highlights and the shadows on the face. This guy is significantly heavier than that speed light. In fact, as far as power goes, this is probably equivalent to 7 of those speed lights. I can be farther away at a greater aperture and still achieve the same look. Now, when I go out to the salt flats or something like that with one of a high school senior and their horses, and I want to photograph them at sunset, what I'll do is just match this up here and then have someone walk along with the horse and them, and I'll take that picture. Now, this light I can't recommend enough, and it's perfect because we're going right into the lighting portion of Tutorial Tuesday, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for the question, Ellie.